Okie dokie. So we have a much better looking list items right now. The whole list, the book list, with some nice photos, with some nice titles, as well as with an awesome authors. However, why don't we talk about the events in JavaScript now, how we can handle them? Because at the moment, the only thing we have been doing dynamically, in fact, is been rendering the lists as well as working with the props. But obviously, the whole point of JavaScript is that this allows the user to really interact with the page. So let's test it out. And for this, we're first going to create some dumb button. So I'm going to say here, whatever within the div, there's going to be a button. Now we can set maybe a type. And for the type, we're going to say, I don't know, add count. Or I'm sorry, no, for the type, we're going to add button. But within the button, let's just say add count. And this is going to make sense a little bit later on as we're going to be working with this dot state. But for now, let's just leave it like this. And then now we need to decide how we're going to be interacting with this button. Because obviously at the moment I can click all day long and nothing is going to happen. And you know what? Since we will going to be using the console, I might as well open it right now. And I'm going to look for the console. And here obviously is going to be my console. Okay, fine. Where are we going from now? Well, I would like to set up here a method. However, the difference right now is going to be that this is not going to be some kind of method that we had already from React. Like, for example, what we had? Well, we had the render method, right? Then also we have the constructor method. In this case, we're going to create our own method. So I'm going to say, let's say handle click. That's going to be my name. And here I can just write that this would be the method. Again, I do need to follow the syntax, but this is the method that we are creating ourselves. And here I'm going to say, I don't know, console log, I guess. So the moment we're going to console log, or the moment we're going to click the button, we're going to console log. And we're going to say you clicked me. Something like this. Again, we save it. Now nothing is happening because we need to somehow connect the both. We have the handle of click, and then we have our button. And the way we do that, we work with the event handlers that React provides. And there's many of them. And we're not going to cover them all. The way we're going to do that, as we're going to be working with our project, as we're going to be working with our tutorials, the moment the event handler is going to come up, we're just going to have it, the event, and then we're going to be working with that particular event. So in our case, this is going to be on click. So the moment I click on this button, something should happen. And here's the kicker. We are passing here the reference. This is very important. So first of all, we need to say this. And then we're looking for the handle click. And this is where you really need to be careful. Because otherwise, if you're going to pass this dot and then handle click, and then you're going to run the function, this is not what you would want. And instead, what happens is it right away runs 6 times where you have you clicked me. And this is not what we're looking for. So we're passing here as a reference. Later on, we're going to be covering what happens as we're passing here the data. So then again, there's going to be multiple ways how we can do this. So in fact, we're going to be passing here the arrow function, and then the function is going to be return and so on and so forth. But we're not covering that right now. For the simple methods, please, one more time, please remember that you are working with a reference. You're not running the function. You're referencing this function. The moment this is going to be clicked, then the function is going to run. So the moment I'm going to save it, then I have my buttons, and notice as I'm clicking, everything is working awesome. I'm just having a bunch of click me's. And obviously, the more components I have, the more buttons I'm going to have, and the more click me's eventually I'm going to get. Okay. So at the moment, you might be looking at it and you're like, awesome, everything is working fine. However, let me give you a mind grenade where you're just going to be considering that maybe everything is not working so well as you thought. So let's say there's a state. And for now, we can create it as a simple state. But later on, we're going to have to create a constructor anyway. But I can tell you right away, this is not going to change anything. It would work exactly the same way for both of them, whether we're setting in constructor or whether we're setting here in the simple state. And let's say the count is going to be 1. Okay, so some kind of variable. And we already know that we can access the variable. So why don't we say like this? Why don't we say you clicked me? That would be number 1. And then we're going to be looking for this variable. So I'm going to say this dot state, and then I'm going to be looking for the count. And let's see what's going to happen. Okay, so the buttons were rendered very successfully. Great, everything is working fine. But what happens when we click the button? Well, I have a big fat error. Now you might be asking, well, why is the error? Because it says here state is undefined. But I mean, we do have the state, so what is the issue? Well, here's the problem within the ES5, because at the moment you're not looking at the arrow functions, you're looking at the regular function, even though this is a method. What happens is this function creates its own context. So you need to bind this keyword so it would point back to the instance of this class. Otherwise, this is going to be pointing to the actual its own context, and then there is no this in this function. So that's why it's saying, well, you don't have no state. What are you talking about? You want the state? Okay, I can get you the state, but I created my own context. I already have this, and this is not working. So, like I said, we would need to bind it or create this as an arrow function. So why don't we first take a look at how we can bind it, and then we're going to set it up as an arrow function. So for this, again, we have the constructor. That would be the method that's going to run every time we're going to instantiate the class. Then we're also going to have to use the super, and then we're going to write props. And this is where we're going to be setting up our handle click. So in this case, we're going to do it like this. We're going to say this dot, then the name of the method that we have, and then we're going to be looking for this dot handle click again twice, and then we need to bind it, and we need to bind it to this. So in this case, what's going to happen? The moment I'm going to save it, check this out. So now everything is working fine. Have you clicked me, and then I have the one, because in this case we're binding the context that the handle click has to the actual class here that we are working with. And again, we can do the same thing here. I can just move it, and you'll see that it's still going to work. So maybe right after props, I'm going to say again this dot state, and then we're going to be again using the handle click method. That would be the basic setup. And that would be one of the ways how we can do. However, if you are turned off by this long syntax and you're like, there's no way I'm going to remember this. Okay, React has a solution for you, because again, I will repeat myself, but there's multiple ways how we can do it. So let me comment this out as well as this guy, just so you have the future reference. And why don't we rewrite this? Why don't we say like this? Why don't we say handle click? Then this is going to be my arrow function. So I'm going to say something like this. Then I'm obviously going to have some kind of implicit return. And in this case, I'm just going to say that there's going to be some kind of console logs. So we're going to write console log, and then for this console log, why don't we, or you know what? Let's just rewrite a little bit. Let me write the curly braces because we're going to have multiple lines. So might as well do that. We're going to write console log. Then we're going to do the same thing, right? We had console log, you clicked me, and that's not what I wanted. Let me again undo it. So you clicked me, that would be one thing. And now we're going to copy and paste it. And now we can access the state, because the difference is that with the arrow functions, they are not creating their own context. So that is the reason why we don't need to bind anything. We can just write it here as the handle click, and everything is going to be working fine. So the moment I'm going to save it, check this out. So as I'm clicking, everything is working fine. So we are affecting the state. And this would be in general your two choices, your possible choices, where if you want to bind them, you can just write it as a ES5, or if you don't want to bind them, you can just use the arrow functions and use the syntax, and everything is going to be working fine. Again, just remember that you will going to be passing the reference. Later on, we're going to look at the other scenario where we're passing some kind of information. So this is going to be changing. However, for the simple functions, you're just passing the reference. That's all. And then everything is going to be working fine, depending on which situation you're going to choose, whether you're going to be binding the regular function or you're going to be choosing the arrow function.